We're here to talk about the real work that you do, that I try to do a little bit of, and that is build things,
Hmm.
that is talk about uh, family a little bit. And so I, of course, am happy to know that you are a freedom minded
Yeah.
individual.
Yes. Yes. That's
And
that's
I
where
would,
it's at, and that's where this is where it all starts. I've always looked at it, being this, obviously being this hardcore sort of libertarian, and I look at it like, the last line of defense certainly against the state is the family. And I think this is why it's a lot of direct effort that seems to come from people that are within government to do everything they can to destroy it, because it seems to legitimize not only their existence but their influence. And it's funny, we talked about the welfare state and how that impacted black, families, and kind of it trying to ostracize, particularly black fatherhood and all of that. Like, this is
oh,
something.
it destroyed it.
Yeah,
It destroyed
literally.
Black fatherhood.
Yes, it did. 100%. Like, it
And
literally did that.
yeah, because people may not know, but the black family unit was stronger than the white family unit prior to the welfare state.
Yes. Correct.
It had a longer longevity of marriages. It had a lower divorce rate. I mean, this it was in a healthy place. There's a whole bunch of other fucked up problems going
Yeah.
on with interactions with the state and maybe with some business owners and stuff like that. Obviously, segregation and Jim Crow was a big deal and a real thing that
Absolutely.
happened.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, you had this I don't know, maybe it was more cohesion in the community and not an influence from this destructive element of government.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think this is the proof is kind of in the pudding with that. When you look at going into even the 30s and the 40s, whether you look at like yeah, we know with the state and how it kind of sent its cronies to destroy, whether it be Black Wall Street and all that. But you saw, despite all of that, the legacy of what slavery was, you saw such rapid like advancement to people. When you look at the Frederick Douglasses of the world, and going into Booker T. Washington's and all of that, like, you look at how during those eras, it was such a fast, rapid pace of success. And you look at black wealth, certainly generationally, it was in a much better spot then. And then, you get into, be it going into FDR after that, and going into like welfare statism, going into the 50s and the 60s, and that influence, it really removed the black father or black family or black father from the family, but just the sanctity of family, black families, was utterly destroyed in that regard. You got to understand that welfare state did what even slavery could not do. Black people went through slavery and still came out of that valuing the sanctity of marriage. Welfare state did what even slavery could not do in breaking that up. And that's a very important thing to note. Like, unfortunately, people don't seem to, definitely a lot of these modern like organizations and people that like to theme themselves as these sort of civil rights leaders of social justice, leave all of that out. And I honestly think this is why a lot of people, when trying to resolve a lot of these issues, first look to the state and how they could utilize that to basically impose their whatever will on the people, to try to get them to change where it is that they are fundamentally. This is what having this conversation often gets me in trouble, because I talk about the Civil Rights Act all the time, and how that was an anti-property rights law or something like
See,
that.
this is where
Like,
I was going to steer the conversation
yeah,
this way,
yeah,
because I wanted to talk to you about I mean, you brought up the really, really important point that segregation was a state imposed thing. Sure, there were a
yes,
lot of the populace that were all for it, and that's fine, but it was still state imposed. And it was a law that was passed in these states that made this happen. But we are not in 1964 anymore.
right.
So is something like the Civil Rights Act still necessary today? Or should we scrap that in favor of freedom, liberty, the right to conduct business and contract with who you want? I wanted your opinion on that.
It should absolutely been scrapped. I love how, rest in peace, who I deem as like the person that got me to where it is that I'm at ideologically. Dr. Walt Williams has talked about this. He was like, the obvious position should have been, if these individuals, regardless of their color, have rights per se,
Right.
you didn't need to an overcorrection like that. You didn't. It wasn't necessarily like, okay, how about this? Stop using essentially the state to, let's say, impede on these individuals' right to not only exist, but to people from a patron level to be able to serve and do whatever it is that they want. But that's not the route that they took. You had the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and all of that, and that kind of set the scene. All these other individual states had their own like civil rights laws and all of that. I'm sure you covered some of that. Like Oregon's kind of their civil rights law is kind of weird. That's where all that kind of Christian Baker stuff and all of that kind of stuff went down and all of that.
You got that. California's got a weird one because California protects political orientation, but it was passed, again, that time and place thing, I think in 1960, either 68 or early 70s. And the purpose of that political orientation was literally only to protect people from being fired if they supported gay rights.
Right.
Like, so they have it in there, and now people are trying to like prod at it and use it. Like, oh, now conservatives or whatever are being discriminated against based on their political beliefs, being fired for their political beliefs. Can we use this against it? And courts are kind of mixed on it, but it's like, it's what you put down on paper lasts a long time. And it's wild to see some of this stuff coming back around. But I'm a freedom guy, and I think that we're at a point in society now, specifically, where anybody can make anything because the technology and the talent it's democratized at this point. All of that technology is accessible. It's cheap enough that with a little bit of money, a little bit of funding, you can get whatever you need. So this is doable now. Wow. I don't think we need these protections. And what's killing me is the left out here is still like they're demanding all of these protections through like the Civil Rights Act or whatever, and comparable bills. But what they're also doing is they're trying to still prop up this corporate structure. And it's like the corporations, if I take your argument, the corporations are the ones who have been doing this to you. Why do you want to force them to love you instead of just beating them?
Dude, that has been my argument against that act forever, because even from, you look at racists, what it essentially allows them to do is racists to hide, right? Some people would think I'm crazy. Would I rather a business owner have on a sign up that says, we don't want to sell to black people? Yes.
Right.
Why? Because I don't want to give them my money. Why would I want to line the pockets up of some person that I know hates me? I'd rather them just be open. Now they're essentially forced into hiding, and the law allows them to do it.
How much easier would it be to make fun of Star Wars if Disney just put up a big sign that says, we don't like you if you're straight, if you're white, if you're conservative, or whatever I don't know what their mixing pot of unfavorable audience is anymore. Like, I know it keeps growing, right? Because it's a soup. You just keep throwing more ingredients in the soup as time goes on. It gets bigger and bigger. But so whatever it is, if they just put up a sign that says, we don't want your money.
And this is why instead of forcing them to take my dollar and then hide behind a law that allows them to basically not, I don't know, display the racism or whatever it is, I would rather just compete with them. I would rather just say, all right, how about this? I'm going to come up with whatever that individual industry is, come up with something and be a legitimate competitor. And now more than ever, you can do that. And that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think we need to really scale back. I mean, this is never going to happen, right? but we can dream. We can dream for the libertarian fantasy where we actually start peeling these things back and say, well, you know what? A lot of racism has kind of normalized out, and you're always going to have racism and tribalism. I think. I don't think you ever get rid of that to some extent, but the state imposed racism is gone. The state encouraged racism is gone. So now you're just going to have some people who either have a bad experience or whatever, and they develop some prejudices, and that's just going to be a wash. But the overwhelming majority of people really don't give a shit. Like they're going to go and they'll say, okay, I don't care who's making my sandwich. I just care if the sandwich is good and
Yeah.
doesn't kill me.
Yeah.
That's it. And same thing with the music, same thing with movies. And once we start doing that, I think we're on the cusp of a boon of real creativity with the entertainment industry. The thing that gets me, no dispute with any of that, is why the left has suddenly become the most pro-corporate simp community I have ever seen. They're like, what?
It's amazing.
Twitter's a private company. And I'm like, oh, can Twitter just exclude black people then?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, they wouldn't do that. Well, how do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like put Ryan Cannell as CEO.
It was like 2020 was an interesting year because you also had the summer of love and all of that. So you had all of these corporate entities signaling in regards to my racism and all of that. And now all of a sudden, the anti-corporate left has now, are now the biggest simps for the corporate entity. And more importantly, them being able to control narratives, which I thought they were not about like at all. Like them basically being able to say that, okay, the truth, we dictate what the truth is. Like us, the mega corporate entities dictate what is going to be deemed as the actual legitimate truth. And that's fascinating how quick that has changed. And it goes to show that maybe in the classical sense, though, that they were successfully able to hijack the term liberal, they were never that. They were absolutely never that. It was more of once they felt like they had the power and the influence, which is what it was ultimately about anyway, they were perfectly fine with these establishments doing all types of jacked up stuff as long as they felt that it was punishing their political enemies. I think we learned that with the sum of love, but also with this COVID crap, that's more so what it's about. It doesn't even have to make sense. None of this has to make sense. They can even say things that are diametrically opposed. I've had to deal with the strike system, though I am like the back-to-back champ regarding getting my YouTube strikes removed, regarding medical misinformation, because I always obtain the receipts and show them. Certainly that, but even with that, it's like they're perfectly fine with that because they think it punishes their political enemies. It has nothing to do with freedom or liberation or what's righteous or what's just. It's all about punishing their political enemies. So they're perfectly fine with you not being able to have a say in that, which is why I think you have these leftists that are latching on to that, and the corporations that have said, you know what, okay, we're going to embrace you. You guys are on our side. As this stuff starts to change and their power and influence goes away, they're seeing that. They're seeing that writing on the wall. Some of this stuff is inevitable. They may can prolong it or and all that, but this is an inevitable thing with the growth of technology. They're going to do everything they can to protect certainly their industries. And it's going to be interesting to see how this stuff plays out over the next half decade, because they're going to protect their interests, but a lot of these guys ain't going to be able to stick around, and there's going to be like nothing they can do about it. So